Howdy guys, Attorney Walter Hnot. I hope you can hear me well. I hope the camera's working okay. Let's get right into it. I got the lighting a little bit better for this video. Please remember, let's get through it. Like, subscribe, and leave 5-star reviews. I'm going to put the little leave 5-star reviews in the section right there below in the chat area. All right, now guys, here's kind of the big thing. With this video, I wasn't totally sure how to approach the idea of a luxury item for a disabled or retired person because they're on a fixed income. So most of these items, all of these items are pretty much under $500, $400, even $300. So these are luxury items that I think are important going into 2023. Now, if it looks like I'm having a tough time looking directly at the camera, it's because there is a massive array of lights around me. You can see my hand is it's just lit up no matter where I go. So with that said, let's get right into the show. Item number one, which I think is incredibly important, being able to have some sort of backup charger. This is the fancy kind that has, your solar panel. You can put your phone on the back. It's got USB options. It's got a light. When they first came out with these, they even had a little fire starter on them, which is actually the ones I really liked because when you think about it, having one of these that can create a fire is ironic. Now, with that said, these tend to totally and completely suck. That is my opinion. I stand by it. They suck. And the reason why is there's not much battery power to them. The solar panel on it takes weeks to actually charge the battery. If you have a case on your phone, you better get it perfectly aligned. Otherwise, this won't work. And these lights are, they're okay. They're not great. Another thing that I want to talk about too is that these things, if you leave them outside, the coloration on the rubber fades on them. So there is that aspect of it, but having a USB charger is incredibly important. Now, with that said, in this show and tell endeavor, whenever you buy one of these, you have to get what's called the 3-in-1 cable. The 3-in-1 cable basically has a USB on one end and then 3 different types of USBs on the other. You got the that kind, the that kind, and the that kind, the that kind, and the iPhone kind, and the other kind. Now, with that said, these are set up so that you can actually go and swap which way goes into something. So, for example, if you want to use the USB charger to charge an item, right, you would put the big plug into this and the little plug into the phone, right? But here's the deal. If you want to go ahead and charge this item, what you'll do is you'll plug the little charger into this item right here, and then you'll plug this big one into the wall, and that'll actually charge it. So the cord goes both ways, which is really, really super duper helpful. But you can also buy them as a 3-pack on Amazon. These are like 20, 30 bucks, 35 bucks. I always seem to buy them exactly at the worst time to buy something. So I always pay a little bit more from what I've found. But anyway, that's important. Now, we're still on number one. I always have a laptop in the car. So something you might want to check out is something like this. This is a 110 inverter. It allows you to plug in USB stuff. That's where you plug in and charge it. That's where you turn it on. That's where you put the AC on for these two puppies. But please know with these things, this is like 150 bucks. Please know with these things, they are not going to run a bigger microwave. They are not going to run a bigger oven. They're not going to run, some items that are larger items. They're just not going to do it. A small laptop, sure, they'll run that. They'll recharge it. They'll give it a second life kind of gig, sure. But for the most part, do not rely on these as your main generator. They're cute, they're adorable, but beyond that, they're not going to do much. So that's just kind of the next thing. All right, the next thing I want to go through real quick, specifically with this is an electric toothbrush or regular toothbrush. So electric toothbrushes, one of the things that they've had in the science journals is that people live significantly longer if they use a higher end toothbrush, which has the capacity to get rid of more of the problems, the plaque buildup, the bacteria, viral, etc., that you do build up in your mouth. One thing I also want to point out is that they are rechargeable using all these types of things. They're also really good in case you have to clean something really well. So like if you were to buy an electric toothbrush and buy multiple heads, you could use it to clean it. And that's something that I think is incredibly important that people don't really think about. In a bad situation, and you never know what 2023 is going to hold. I mean, look, if I said that there was going to be war in 2023, everybody in the chat session would say, absolutely not. There's no possible way. How dare you say that? I get it. I get it. I get it. Just like how we foresaw COVID. and murder hornets and political unrest. Just like how we saw all of that, we're going to obviously know the outcome of what 2023 is going to bring. So now, number 3, here we go. Bluetooth sound reduction microphone headphones. All right, now these are basically headphones designed to reduce sound. Now there's 2 kinds. There's the work outside kind, which are apparently on and dripping wet, which is not a good sign. I use these all the time when working outside because A, it's good to protect your hearing, but B, you can play the radio, you can answer phone calls, all that stuff. These are the 3M ones. I have no idea what their model number is. And yes, they're covered in dirt. But the point is, I tried to wash them up. The point is, though, those are actually really good because if you're in a bad situation where there's potentially some sort of battle or war or military exercise or just some occupation, just any old occupation, those will allow you to sleep through the night as they break down your door. Now, there's another type to that, which is obviously way better. I use these when I have to focus. So when I have to write briefs, my extreme, obsessive compulsive disorder and attention deficit disorder, they just come right on out. So I have to basically wear these. These do an amazing job at cutting out sound. I mean, incredible job at cutting out sound. And the whole deal with them is that if you want to sleep in the car, you use these. If you want to sleep and there's some sort of construction going on, or you have a triggering sound aspect to you, these are incredible. None of these companies, by the way, are paying me to say any of this. I bought these literally full price Amazon because, as you can see, we have so many sponsors. Now, with that said, one of the problems with these is that these don't hold onto your head that well. The other ones, they get on, they really stay on. But these, if you're in a car, they'll bump off. If you roll over on your pillow, they'll pop off. Not the sturdiest construction on them. The other ones are a bit more sturdy, but the sound quality is not very good. These do allow you to make phone calls as well and do all that Bluetooth stuff. Now, as a cheaper option, you guys have these. So basically, you pinch them down twice. A pinch, a pinch, a pinch, a pinch. And then basically you put it into your ear, you let it expand, and then magically you can't hear that well. So these are okay. I hate using them. Over time, they cause severe wax buildup. They're not pleasant to use, but they are what they are. So anyways, the point is, guys, use these if you need to, but it's an item where you could have those other luxury too, which will help you sleep through potential problems, okay? Now, and Ronald might actually be right when he says that we're already potentially at war. Now, the next thing that might be a luxury item for the disabled and the retired to have, which I think is important going on into the future, is a burner phone or potentially two-way radios. If you want to, basically really do your thing, you can always get a ham radio, but that's overkill. Point is, having a burner phone, having, for example, two-way radios, that'll get you out of most problems that you run into. I know 2 homeless people who basically had a pair of ham radios, and they would warn each other every time the cops would come into the woods. That's one way that they would use them. I know disabled people who have burner phones. Some of them use them for nefarious purposes. Some of them use them as a backup phone in case their other phone dies, or in case their other phone gets broken, or their other phone gets stolen. So just something to keep in mind. All right, next thing, number 5, a freezer cooler bag. All right, you guys have probably seen them. Obviously, I'm not talking about, this Yeti stuff, etc., but a freezer cooler bag, it's the non-hard cooler, essentially. If you find ice, a mini fridge on the go. If you don't, it's still a good bag. Like an escalator, it never really breaks. It just turns into stairs. So the point with this is a lot of people buy bags, right? You buy bags, everybody buys bags because they got to put their stuff in it when they have to travel or go someplace, or they're just trying to go ahead and consolidate their stuff. If you can find a good deal on a freezer style, a cooler style bag, that's basically a 2-in-1 purpose bag. It's just a good idea to have it because a lot of the stuff you're going to need or find in any negative situation you run into is a frozen food item or whatever. You throw it in there, poof, you can eat it later. All right. I'm keeping the intro to this short because people were very upset that I don't spend enough time answering questions, even though I just, worked all day out inside, had a hearing, did all that jazz until 5, and then at 5:30, I worked outside moving dirt with basically a Kubota and implement. So with that said, now that we've made it to this portion of it, oh, and I almost forgot. I got in so much trouble for this last time. This is important. The number one thing you have to put in your bag, because remember how we did the top 5 things like you should have? The number one thing you should put in your bag, which is like the bag that you potentially take somewhere if there's a problem, right? A bug out bag or a I'm going on a picnic and never coming home bag, is your identification information in copy form. Making a copy of your driver's license, making a copy of, whatever types of, whether it's a concealed carry or a, sandwich eating contest award show, winner card, whatever. Making sure you have a copy of the cards that are important to you to define essentially who you are, what your background is, what your knowledge base is, all those things. Yeah, color copy would be nice too if you have a color printer. So anyways, guys, so let's get right to it. Real quick, I'm going to put the phone number in there. We're going to start taking calls and begin the process of going through this section. For those of you guys who don't know, every Thursday night I go live and basically answer questions of people calling in who want to know how something works, or maybe they want to run hearing questions with me. I do this as a free thing. A lot of the people that I can't represent, I open up this opportunity for them to call me and basically begin the process of learning how to, act and react at their hearing or how things work in general. So, all right. So, real quick, I put the phone number up there. While the phone number is up there, I'll basically give you guys, and I'll wait for a call because I haven't got anything on the phone yet. So the basic thing is this. I'll give you an update on the farm. We are in the final stages of preparing the barn by having to fill a foot worths of dirt into each stall. And because I couldn't afford up here, like I have an in-cab Kubota, an older one, down in Florida with a front loader. A front loader is that bucket that goes like this in the front. Well, I couldn't afford one of those for up here. So what I found online was what's called a 30-inch. Basically, it's a 3-point, which means it goes on the back of the tractor, like little bucket, and it sucks. But I'll tell you more about that later. Here we go with the first call. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name throughout this process. Also, would you like me to answer a specific question, or would you like me to go ahead and run hearing questions with you?
I think our first question is due.
Perfect.
Specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. If there was to enter the I know.
Well, they automatically enter into the trial work period and the extended eligibility program, but the Ticket to Work program requires a contractual agreement between you and the local field office, the SSA. And so it's not super duper automatic. And the proper way to do it is to call up and ask to speak with the assigned rep at the local field office who can sign you up for the Ticket to Work program. Because remember, the Ticket to Work program is that 5-year-long program where you're agreeing to a whole bunch of things, and that place that you're going to be working at has to be pre-approved. But on the other side, the 9-month trial work period, that you could be working anywhere. So you could be working at Chuck E. Cheese or the IRS. You could be working at any one of those.
Okay. Let's say and
Sure.
it's not. So that would.
So basically, with the Ticket to Work program, and I mean, Porsche could be covered under that. So just to, before you sell them down the river, the SSA could approve the program with Porsche for you to work within it. for that 5-year interval within that corporation. So I wouldn't sell every single potato. It's not all just the goodwill, sales floor. It's places that you can basically get the SSA to approve for that 5-year period. Now, the easiest one is the trial work period. You get 9 months, you earn over SGA, you blow through those 9 months, you're good. And remember, the triggering point is in like 900 and something. It's not going over SGA. It's like 900 and something. I forget what it is right now, but that's what triggers that particular month. So if you're going to earn in that month, make sure you earn, as much as you can. And then check with the SSA to see how many trial work period months you have. Sometimes they can provide that information. With that said, and I think this is important, if you want the long-term answer, where you get to keep your benefits and you get to keep your money from your job at Porsche for a 5-year period, you're going to have to go Ticket to Work. But after the Ticket to Work program, they take your benefits, because the whole point of it is they're allowing you to keep your benefits and work at that job under a contract at the SSA, so that after 5 years, you're no longer on that program.
Okay. If things are going through coming up on years, there's no. Sorry, my dog.
Well, I mean, you got to remember, like, there's a lot of reviews. Like with Ticket to Work program, they're checking in. So this is like you're not going to have a CDR. That's their promise to you. You will not de facto have a CDR throughout this process. And as a result of that, what you have to kind of keep in mind is that, the reviews are different. It's more so, are you doing what the corporation requires of you and meeting all of the goals set out in that Ticket to Work program? So like, if you call the SSA and get a copy of the Ticket to Work program contract, you'll have a better understanding specifically what's required.
Okay. All right. So, to make, do I feel? Yeah, it's a big piece, and this is, for mental health disability, so that reviews are possibly. Sure. So this is a big decision to make on how to approach it. So would it hurt? Or, like, I'm considering, joining the workforce again.
Yeah, what you do is just call the local field office. You go to Google, you type in SSA field office zip code search. You're searching a zip code. You go to the website, the .gov website. You put in your zip code. It gives you the field office that's closest to you. You call them. You say, hey, I'm so-and-so. Here's my social. I'm an awesome human being. I'm potentially interested in going and working under the Ticket to Work program. Can you guys go ahead and have an SSA representative, usually a regional manager, reach out to me about signing up to be on the Ticket to Work program? And then they'll reach out to you, and basically you'll begin that process. And somewhere in there, you'll ask for a copy of the Ticket to Work agreement. Yeah.
So there will be a chance to say, well, after consideration, I want to do that.
Yeah, they can't force you to do it once you start, when you sign it. But even once you sign it, like if you get medically worse, they're restricted too, and what they can expect from you. But but yeah, I mean, before you sign it, you have the ability to go ahead and say, this isn't for me.
Okay. So I can change my mind.
Yeah. Perfect.
Before, I'm just calling, like, hey, what are my options for work out there? And they'll tell me, maybe give me a list of employers, or
Well, basically what it comes down to is, essentially, putting it simply, you get the option to have a sit-down discussion. And when you go and speak with them about what your goals are, they see if those goals are a good fit for their Ticket to Work program. Some programs are an easy fit, and they're already set up to be integrated directly into the Ticket to Work program, one of them. So, remember, plan accordingly, and, have all your ducks in a row to have the highest potential likelihood of having a successful setup, because you don't necessarily want to go work at Goodwill. You probably want to do, Photoshop and fireworks designs, to go ahead and do marketing management for Porsche. So if that's the goal, make sure you outline that stuff and make sure that you have the correct contact information for the person at Porsche to go ahead and basically, integrate them with the SSDI regional manager so that you can be signed up for that program,
Okay, that's cool. And this is an actual potential scenario. Well, I've been, on disability since 2020. I've been working, doing volunteer, like doing social. Is easy like that. It's just fun. I'll do some
Excellent. All the best to you. I wish you the absolute best, because doing media design and SEO and all that stuff it's exhilarating. I'll catch you a little bit later. Make sure you check in with us whenever you can and give us an update, because I'm curious how the Porsche thing goes.
Thank you. In the chat.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Well, have a wonderful night.
Thank you, and everybody else too who's listening. I'm with you.
Excellent. Oh, well, I'll catch you later. Have fun.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you. Bye. So that's really cool, because, remember, a lot of people get opportunities when they're disabled, and being able to connect those to essentially have a job that they've always wanted, or they never had the contacts and now they do, and they're disabled and they want to jump into that. That's so crucial. That's such a big deal. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next potential caller. Let me see real quick. Okay, yeah, so keep in mind, guys, when you call me from an unknown number, like you hide your number, I can't call you back. So just as a heads up, I'm going to put the phone number in here again real quick. So whoever wants to call me, go ahead and give me a call. So the thing is this. Oh, wow, the caller was cutting out 9% of the time. I'll hold up the phone. So this really high-end webcam has this thing where it only captures audio directly in front of it. I mean, I can turn it off, and I will turn it off for next time. But the whole point is it doesn't capture all the audio out here. It only captures the audio like right in front of it. But I'll turn that off for next time. Let's see. All right, so, all right, cool. So we're having a relax. This is good, because I was super beat up working today. All right, that I want to talk about is essentially what's going to be happening in 2023 with the changes in politics and what's going to be happening when agendas are pushed. The main problem that I foresee is that, as you know, Republicans tend to not spend and Democrats tend to overspend. And when Republicans don't spend and they save money, then people get upset because, the programs that they sometimes use aren't getting funded. On the other end, the Democrats usually overspend, and when they overspend, they create economic problems. And one of the big problems that I see with this whole inflation bill is that, and a bunch of really high-end, massive groups have come out now explaining that this, for some reason, there's no audio. There's no audio. Hold on, guys. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Oh, no. You guys can't hear me? Is that a yes? Is that yes? No? Yes? Let me see. Yes? Okay, cool. All right, so you guys can hear me. Awesome. So kind of the bottom line here is this, but not the callers. Oh, okay, that's fine. I'll hold the phone up for the callers. That's no biggie. All right, so one of the big problems that I foresee is that the Biden administration is claiming that in order to fix Excellent, Sophomore. Very good. Excellent. Thank you for the $4.99 donation. I really appreciate it. That's awesome, Sophomore. Very cool. I love it. So the big thing here is this. Most of the time we can hear you. Okay, cool. That's probably the internet because I'm on top of a mountain. The big thing is that because Biden is going to push forward and pass this new massive spending bill, what will happen to those who are on fixed income is that they will become massively, massively punished. And at the same time, the problem with that is that those people he intended to help are going to have a harder time affording more of the basic items that they normally would. If you look at the basic items, there are things like fuel, there are things like clothing, and there are things like food, and of course, housing. Housing's not going to change that much. Food is going to massively and drastically change. Clothing is going to change, a chunk. And I think fuel is going to go back up after the midterms. So the problem I foresee with this whole situation with, essentially how retired and how disabled on a fixed income are going to be able to spend going forward is that they're going to have less money than they ever have in 2023. And the problem inherent with that is that I feel like external forces, big ones, are going to occur in the not too distant future. Now, some people want to know what I foresee knowing what's happening overseas, what's happening with our government when it comes to spending, tariffs, which are, of course, the taxes of things coming into this country. And of course, the big thing that's everybody's really afraid of, which is this whole reserve currency shakeup. As you've heard on a bunch of the financial channels that talk about essentially how somebody can go ahead and do better by making better Social Security choices, the main function of Social Security at this point is kind of like the bedrock. It keeps people's heads just above water, but most people are pretty much drowning at this point. They just can't get enough air. So as a result of that, I started to look at making some videos about how to invest when you're on these programs. And the first one I tackled, which was absolutely insane when you think about it, is how to essentially go ahead and invest when you're on SSI. Now, a lot of you guys are going to say there's no actual way to invest when you're on SSI. A, you don't have enough money. B, you don't have enough money coming in. C, there's too many restrictions. And then, of course, D, you basically are just trying to survive in general. That is all true. That is all 100% true. But there is actually a way to invest if you're on SSI. The way you can invest while on SSI is to use one of the allowances under the restrictions. SSI people de facto cannot afford increasing their housing. That's just not going to happen. They don't have enough money. They don't have enough money to play the housing game, the upgrade game, etc. Most of them are in a rent situation. All right, I'm going to take this call and then I'll tell you about the investing for us. Oh no, missed a call from Anonymous. Yeah, if you guys call me anonymously, I can't call you back. So, maybe turn that off on your phone, but there's the phone number. All right, so let's talk basically about what's going on with this whole investment thing. All right, so the first thing you need to know when it comes to investing for SSI is that there's an allowance, if you will. And the allowance is relatively simple. The allowance is that you're allowed to have one car, and it doesn't matter what kind of car you actually have. It could be a Rolls Royce. It could be just a crappy beater car. It could be something that is, on the way of being destroyed. It could be an RV, but it's a car. It's something basically that you use to drive to your medical appointments. It's something that you use to basically get from point A to point B. Here, let's see if we can take this anonymous call. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot, live with Disability Resolution PA. We are live on YouTube. Please remember to use okay, so that anonymous person keeps calling and then hanging up. So we're just going to skip that person. So here's the deal. The way that you can actually invest on SSI is by upgrading your vehicles, by doing repairs on the vehicles. Now, hear me out on this. The SSI restrictions, you can't have more than $2,000 in the bank. They wanted to raise that to $10,000. You can only have up to essentially your max income coming in, being $841 from the program, and then everything above 85 bucks, basically, they take away $1 from every $2 that you earn from your benefits. So the big important thing that you have to keep in mind when you go to invest as an SSI person is that the best way to make money with selling vehicles is to essentially find something that's relatively cheap, right? So let's say that you have $1,000 saved up and it's a car that, needs cleaning. It's a car that needs basic, basic repairs, basic upkeep stuff, whatever. Maybe you have to replace a glass or something. And the reality of it is that the main way that a person could invest and then raise money on the SSI Supplemental Security Income Program is to swap or basically, sell cars, to buy them cheap and then do a little bit of repairs and sell them for more. Now, SSI people, ironically, are at an advantage when it comes to this. And the reason why they're at an advantage when it comes to this is that at the end of the day, most SSI people know somebody with an older car or a car that they could do a little bit of repairs to, and then basically swap it out, make some money for a better car. The way that some SSI people will take this, which you probably already started to think of, is that some of the biggest money that can be made on buying and selling, because there's no magic, prices where everybody has everything worked out, is in the RV market. So a lot of people don't realize, but RVs can be purchased and sold for an absolutely ridiculously cheap amount or expensive amount. There's no magic to knowing exactly what an RV is worth. That's why when it comes to RVs, a lot of them are sold for, basically, more than they should be or less than they should be. It's all a game. It's like buying a painting. It's all a game. It's like buying a painting. It's all a game. So the main thing that you have to keep in mind with this is that at the end of the day, when it comes to, making money that you can go ahead and apply going forward when it comes to investments with SSI, is buying vehicles because you're allowed one vehicle under the rules, fixing it up, selling it, buying a vehicle, fixing it up, selling it, buying a vehicle, fixing it up, and selling it. Now, some of you are going to be able to go ahead and do a trade, right? You fix this vehicle up, you trade it for a different vehicle. You fix that vehicle up, you trade it for a different vehicle. That's the main way that somebody who's hyper restricted by the government can actually go ahead and do some sort of side investment. Now, some of you guys are thinking, well, how am I going to make this my main investment? How am I going to make a ton of money? Well, the reality is you're not. That's the whole point of SSI. You don't really have the ability to go ahead and do investments on SSI because too many things are considered to be income. And those things that are not considered income are basically just, they're too hard to obtain. However, vehicles, because you have that exception, there's a lot of things that you can do that you could not do before. And let me explain why. When I have a truck problem, when I have a car problem, when I have an issue when it comes to my vehicle, I always buy the part and fix it myself. And the reality of it is that people did not know how to fix their cars for a really long time. And then they came out with these little devices, and they're chip readers. You plug them into your car. Most vehicles nowadays have a chip reader. You can buy a chip reader for $40 at Walmart that will tell you most of the things that are wrong with the vehicle. As a result of that, SSI people could invest 40 bucks, buy a car, be allowed to keep the car without having it, be negative towards them in any way, fix it up a bit by watching YouTube videos on specifically what the code means, how to apply it, buying the parts, and then swapping them out, getting it working better, and then swap it up, sell it, etc. That is the main thing when it comes to SSI that people can do. Now, when it comes to SSDI, you don't have all those restrictions and you don't have all those traditional problems. Then we start to get into what's considered income, what's not considered income if you have a little bit more money. What I want to do is specifically on SSDI benefits when it comes to how much you have saved. How much could you make as an investment as $100? How much could you make as an investment as $500, $1,000, $10,000? And the reason why is that SSDI people do not have all these. SSDI people could potentially create some group where they all put in a little bit of money to invest into buying some place. And then they go ahead and receive income from people renting that place. There's a lot of different ways these SSDI people could go ahead and do it. They're the very similar ways to the retirement people, except the retirement people have even fewer restrictions. As you guys know, things are going to get even more expensive. As you guys know, the financials of surviving in America, the standard of living is going way down because it's really expensive to live in America now. And the problem inherent with this is that the people who are being punished the most really didn't do anything to cause it. I had a buddy today say to me, and he was kind of he was angry. He was, because people get really excited about the whole political thing, and I try to, at this point, just stay away from it. But a buddy said to me, he's like, look, I'm so angry about what's going on with the economy. I'm so angry about how people don't have stuff. And, I voted the way I did because I thought I was going to get more. And my response to him was, well, you did know, like from the, the onset, the outset, the whatever you want to put it as, you did know how these two groups always work. You always have the Republicans not spending on stuff, and then people call them the devils. And then you always have the Democrats spending way too much. And then some people love them. And then all the other people who have to then pay for it call them the devils. So as a thing, you know what I mean? As a reaction, we all knew. We all had a good idea as to what was going to happen politically. I thought more of that spending too much was going to go in the direction of the retired and the disabled and the survivors under the Social Security program. I was wrong. There are some really good things happening, like the prescription drug negotiation option. But for the most part, the Democrats have not really been able to connect with their promises. Now, with that said, that's all going to become moot very soon because probably the Senate's going to go back to the Republicans. And if the Senate goes back to the Republicans, then at that point, there's nothing that's going to be passed by Biden at all. It's just nothing's going to make it to him for a signature. And a lot of people don't realize that the president sits with the power of executive orders and executive agreements. Executive orders are inside the U.S. Executive agreements are outside the U.S. But the main power of the president as the operating chief of the United States is his power to make agreements with foreign nations. His main power is not actually inside the U.S. Sure, setting who's going to be the Supreme Court justices, like we learned with Roe v. Wade, that was a huge, change that a lot of people didn't expect. Or, for example, the ability to go ahead and begin the process of, claiming that we are now in a state of war. Those large functions are within the U.S., but the president's main power has always been, for the most part, in his ability to make agreements externally with other countries. Now, with that said, the big problem we're starting to run into is that we're not, as a country, able to get things as cheaply from nations that used to produce things as cheaply. That means China, Indonesia, Vietnam, not producing items at a cheap enough rate. And of course, by the time they get over to the US, as a result of that, the US has, a duty to lower the tariff amount, how much they're being taxed and coming into this country, so that we, the people, can buy them at a cheaper amount. That's just basic financial understanding of making sure people can afford products. The Biden administration has lacked on their treatment of this because as products have come into the United States, the problem is that they're being taxed at too high of a level and their prices are skyrocketing. There's another big issue that I feel like nobody's really talking about, and that's that a lot of these meat manufacturers in the United States are at a reduced capacity, or some of them have even shut down. So, for example, there's the big pork problem. Shortly, there's going to be a big chicken problem. So, the issues we're facing here is that there is no good outcome to 2023 when it comes to essentially being able to buy things cheaper. And a lot of people, when they define a better America, right, building back a better America, it's being able to buy things cheaper, being able to buy more of things, being able to have cheaper housing, being able to, basically have less stress on their daily activities. With that said, I think one of the objectives of this next situation is to figure out how Americans are going to be able to afford basically what 2023 has to offer. 2023 has to offer extremely high food costs. Food will go up significantly more than any other category, including clothing and including housing. One of the big things that can be done about that is that they can ramp up production at farms, create special tax options for new farms to start, and they can try and get as much production of food onto the marketplace as possible to make it competitive. But the thing is, you have to balance that, because if you go too far into that, you end up with the milk situation. So as you guys know, there were hundreds of thousands of milk farms, and then they lost hundreds of thousands of milk farms because basically they could not produce milk from cows at a cheap enough rate to get it to market for people to buy it. So we are evolving into a one massive farm society. And then some of those massive farms are shutting down. And those massive farms require major investments in technology. A lot of you don't realize, but they have a cow walk into the line, and the machine with basically all these suction units will go ahead and attach and do everything using lasers, extract the milk, and then onto the next cow. What a lot of people don't realize is that obviously the local farms, the small farms, are not going to be able to buy into that particular level of technology. There's another thing that's happening too, which is that basic hay production, driving tractors around, the diesel, gasoline is much cheaper. We know now, very simply put, that manipulation of fossil fuels is at its probably the highest point we're going to see in my lifetime. We know that politically there's a massive manipulation of these fossil fuels going on right now for a bunch of reasons. Number one, gasoline is much cheaper, but diesel hasn't become much cheaper. Now, gasoline, a lot of people think, is easier to produce than diesel. It's not. Diesel takes very little when it comes to the refining process to make it. Diesel is also significantly easier to store because it's not really flammable. In order to get diesel to go ahead and do that little tiny explosion inside the engine, you have to particleize it, or whatever it's called, where they, it's like you take a spritz bottle. You have to make tiny little specks of it, and then you have to compress the hell out of those little specks. So they spritz inside the cylinder, and then they use the cylinder to crush that diesel. And then with those two actions, you can get it to basically ignite. Whereas gasoline, drip, drip, light a fire, you have the explosion. But gasoline requires a significant amount of refining. So there's no reason why diesel should be more expensive than gasoline, especially when diesel is so much easier to find, produce, etc., get to market. A lot of you guys don't realize that with diesel, you can have much cheaper pump systems. You can transport it in a much simpler and easier way. However, with gasoline, everything's more expensive because nothing can have a spark to it. Another thing to really keep in mind with this, that we know why there's massive manipulation with the market right now, is that when it comes to gasoline and attachment to the cost of living adjustment, a lot of things have to be cheap over the next couple of months, so that when October rolls around and we start to find out what the new COLA is going to be going into 2023, the government can keep what you guys get very, very low. If the cost of living adjustment is very, very low, then the government gets to pay you significantly less. And if the government gets to pay you significantly less, then your standard of living decreases because it actually costs up here to live, but they only have to pay you this. So as a result of that, what's happening now is basically the Biden administration, who was supposed to really promote essentially, getting more benefits to the American people, has now made things, unfortunately, less expensive during these crucial months. Midterms are coming up, which will result in a COLA imbalance. So kind of like last year with the 5.9% COLA, and then we look at the consumer price index and we look at other factors, and it was actually around like 10 plus. So you guys got a little boost, even though it was a historic boost. Now that shows you how bad it was. Obviously, COVID and things like that. But the reality was you received probably around half of the boost that you were supposed to get, which is unfortunately politics of the people. Which brings me to my next point. I'm not trying to go after him or say he's a terrible, horrible, evil, whatever. I'm not, I want you to understand there's really only two options when it comes to these two different types of frontrunners. There's your Biden option and your Trump option. Trump would have done a much better job with the economy, and none of the options for increasing Social Security would have been on the table. Trump had an intention to get rid of the Social Security tax and then somehow magically figure out essentially, and I looked into it, and I mean, maybe it would have worked out, maybe, but to go ahead and fund it from general, essentially general taxes. Would that have worked? Who the hell knows? Who knows? You know what I mean? Look, it takes trillions to run the Social Security system. It takes a lot of money to make this thing work. So the next thing I want to point out is, Trump would not have been somebody to increase Social Security benefits. And it would have been significantly harder to get onto Social Security disability benefits had Trump buy in through his Commissioner Saul, had they stayed in. So something I just want to point out real quick that I think is incredibly important with this whole scenario. At the end of the day, Trump would not have given you guys what you wanted other than basically an economy that worked better. He would have done more with basically selling things that, and keeping, options open for the gas and fuel companies to get as much out of the earth as they could as we went through the recovery process. That would have been his gig. So you wouldn't have seen a lot of boosts or whatever specific to those receiving retirement, disability benefits, et cetera, under the Social Security umbrella, which we call the RSDI, Retirement Survivors Disability Insurance. Now, with that said, we got Biden. The big move that surprised me with Biden was that I knew more taxes were going to come to the people, but since taxing the people is unpopular, what he opted to do instead was to go ahead and tax billion-dollar plus corporations and then basically hyperfund the IRS to go after the middle class to get more taxes out of them. And what was so scary about that is that instead of it being a thing where you're having increased taxes, he's just basically going after anybody he can through an IRS that's filled with more and more auditors. So the most audits that will occur basically in your lifetime, when it comes to like an increase on the map, when you look at we're going boom like that, that'll be over the 2023, 2024, 2025 kind of years. And as a result of that, what I think is incredibly important to keep in mind is that a lot of people have been advising with their financial channels not to do anything crazy or out there or wacky with their taxes over the next couple of years. What they're trying to realistically say to you is, when it comes to deductible, afraid. When it comes to side gigs, be afraid. You've probably noticed that under the Biden administration, all of your side gig options, all of those islands have dried up because the Venmo, the Zells, the Cash Apps, the PayPals, everything has to be reported to the government over a certain amount, and the certain amount is super duper low. So all of like hey, I'm going to do an ice cream stand, I'm going to do sell this or sell that. All of kind of the background. Wow, Shirley, thank you for the $19.99 donation. I really, really appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you. Oh, it's got a little samurai too. That's adorable. So all the things you have to keep in mind are that he is drying up people's ability to go ahead and have side gigs without those side gigs being taxed. So what's happening is the great, almost like, think of it as like a federal government dome is slowly pressing down on Americans' heads when it comes to taxation. And the future of all this is that people are going to be less likely to be able to earn lots of money, to have extra cash on the side, your rainy day stuff. And unfortunately, it's ironic. It's almost ironic. Normally, you would expect the Republicans to want basically, people to pay their taxes, right? Because they want to reduce what they have to pay and they want people to pay their taxes. That way the system better balances itself for some sort of, internal audit. But instead, they had Biden do that. And what this shows me is that the federal government intends to get as much as it can out of its people and spend, spend, spend. It also has good insight into the future of this whole program and problem, which is if the federal government gets into a war, right? And I mean, that's not something that should be taken lightly, but it's also something that's not off the table. China has consistently sent their jets into the airspace of Taiwan, and there's been a lot of scary things happening there. Australia keeps buying more and more very expensive fighter jets to be competitive against China. Basically, as you can see, things are moving forward with NATO when it comes to, essentially involving other countries and inviting other countries into it. Things are kind of scary right now, which is why I wanted to do the video on this stuff, because these are luxury items. They're not super cheap, but they're not super expensive, but they're items that disabled people and retired people could potentially buy. And so the whole big thing here is this. At the end of the day, finding any and all way to go ahead and decrease your costs is crucial. If that means buying a space heater that you can put on a reliable surface to go ahead and not pay for a larger heater to make the same amount of heat, or a mini air conditioner, and you're just spending more time in one room and you go to the other room when you need to, or for example, having programs that will supply you, whether you're a mother or whether you're a homeless person seeking housing, any group that basically give you and assist you funding is really good. And that's the government, the county, the federal, the state, and also the religious groups, the churches, etc. Another thing that I think is really important, basically, is that at the end of the day, some people are going to be struggling more than others, and there's going to be a large amount of desperation going on in the open market. I think if we're just really honest with ourselves and we don't BS ourselves on any of this, the people who are going to suffer the most in 2023, keeping the military out of the conversation, because obviously if something happens, they're going to suffer the most. But, the people that are civilians who will suffer the most are those who live in cities. I had somebody ask me the other day, he said, hey, what's the dealio when it comes to, you working outside? Like, why don't you just hang out, go to a cafe, sip a coffee, enjoy your life? And my response to that is, wow, Linda Soto, thank you. I will buy treats for them. They're right now, my little Shadow and Sweetie are right now in Fort Lauderdale. They get hand fed every day. They're living the dream. They go on 2 walks a day. They're just absolutely living a dream. They did have one issue where a neighbor brought his dog. He owned a house, was renting to somebody, and the dog was running around. And then when my mom approached him, he basically told him to go F off, and that if we had an issue with his dog running around without a leash, that we should call the police. And and that's the thing, like when it's a little dog, it's like whatever. You know what I mean? If you got a little dog that's like a 30-pounder running around, it's whatever. But when you got a 60+ pounder, and I think his dog was like 80, 90 pounds, it's a problem. But anyway, so the point is, one thing that I think is incredibly important to keep an eye on is the situation with those who live in the city. Cities are going to become rampantly more expensive, and there should be things that make them cheaper, right? Everybody's in a small area, which means transportation in is really easy and cheap because you're just bringing a lot of stuff to one spot. A lot of the people in the city don't have to have transportation in the normal sense of a car or a truck. They just use the bus, the T, if you're in Boston, like I used for all those years, and things like that. But we all know better. And what that means is that basically, just to make things really, really simple, when you live in the city, something that costs, I don't know, let's say $2 in the country is $4 in the city. Something that potentially costs, for example, housing, a small apartment in the country, or something small would be, $600, $700 a month. Whereas in the city, depending on which city you're on, I mean, they have crazy ones. They have little itty bitty 1-bedroom apartments in New York going for $4,000 a month, which to me is insane. So the big thing that you have to worry about is the housing. And then, of course, right, so I see there's the electric, internet companies, all that stuff. There's programs to help with all those. But the big problem with these programs is that they are not a long-term fix to a standard of living reduction problem. So, for example, I think a lot of disabled and retired people in the not too distant future are going to be moving out of the city, and they'll make their move to the suburbs, and then the suburbs will get very expensive, and the transition will then be more to the countryside, the county roads, etc. I don't see this as necessarily a horrible thing, but I do see it as people sometimes having to sell off their stuff to go buy, someplace else that's cheaper. A lot of people keep calling me about Tennessee. I haven't checked into Tennessee with why it's the cheapest right now, but a lot of people I've had like two people call me today alone about moving basically to Tennessee to be able to afford things financially. I will say this. I've been in disability benefits for a really, really long time. And the thing that I think really, really, really important about understanding how this all kind of worked out. And they did an article where basically people since like 2000 or something lost 40% of their benefits. And the largest decrease in worth of their benefits because of the cost of living adjustment has happened over the past year. So I think what's important to realize is that people used to be able to 20, 25 years ago receive disability benefits and have a pretty darn good life. They used to be able to receive their retirement benefits and have a pretty darn good life. But the problem that I think we run into with this particular situation is that there's no immediate fix on the table anymore. And a lot of people voted specifically for a guy to fix exactly that. And that's why I made that one video explaining why going into 2023. So think about this. 2022, Biden didn't have it on the budget for an increase for Social Security benefits, retirement, disability, etc. 2023, Biden doesn't have it on the budget for basically increasing Social Security, disability benefits, or retirement benefits, which means we look to 2024 as to whether he will potentially do that. The expectation from my table is that he probably will put something in the budget there because his reelection will be determined by it. The amount of immigrants let into the country who will have voting capacity by that time will not be enough to offset the massive voting power of those who are receiving Social Security benefits. So, in order for essentially Biden to go ahead and successfully win some sort of presidential election into the 2024-2025 arena, he's going to have to present to those people who will decide the election a reason why they should stick with him. And the reason why they should stick with him is usually because of a benefit increase for retirement benefits, SSI, Social Security, disability insurance, etc. However, the problem that he faces is that he's got to fix the economy. And the way he's fixing it by basically using this massive taxation option by spending a lot to go ahead and audit a bunch of Americans to get Americans to pay for more of it, even though Americans are hurting right now, it's a failed system. And the problem is that it's a failed system and it's going to fail over the next 4 to 5 years. It's not something that's going to bring in as much cash as they think it will, even when they tax these billion-dollar corporations that extra amount. And here's why. The billion-dollar corporations are going to restructure, become smaller corporations selling specific products and product lines, and then they won't be able to tap them because those smaller corporations will become separate entities. It's a tough situation, what I'm getting at, because the fix that they're all talking about, and I've heard their talking points, the fix that they're talking about takes the gray wiggle room out of those who are working or want to have a side gig and snuffs it out. And like I've said in other videos, the main problem that I foresee when it comes to building or updating buildings, look, I'm not an idiot. When it comes to disabled people and retired people going forward and affording somebody to come and fix the wall, fix the roof, add another room to their house, whatever. I'm not an idiot. I know what they do every single time. They contact around their buddies. They see who's got a buddy in construction, who's got some machinery, who can go and take care of it, and they pay them under the table and they get it done. The reality is now the IRS will be utilizing a lot more technology to find and search and see what you're doing as a human being in America. They're going to be able to know specifically when you've received some sort of income or improvement benefit that is potentially taxable. So my thing here is this. What I'm worried about is that, look, it used to cost, $6,000 to paint a house 10 years ago. Now a lot of those painters are charging between 15 to 20 grand for that same amount of work. And that's because the second option that usually comes out is, okay, well, what if we did this under the table, blah, blah, blah. Well, then I could do it for, let's say 10 grand, yada, yada. And that's how business was done. That's how they would do it. But with this new taxation system, they're going to have eyes on a lot of stuff. And the whole, I give you this, you give me that, like a barter system, it's going to die. People are going to be too afraid to go ahead and barter because there's just too much potential problems that come with the taxation audit. I think that people are going to become furious. And here's what will happen, just so you guys know. When a significant percentage of human beings in America receive audit notices, Biden's going to use the technique that, leaders have used before to say, well, we didn't think it was going to be like this, or, well, it's not me, it's that agency, it's the IRS, they're doing their job. And what will happen is some of them will attribute that anger to the IRS, but most of them nowadays will attribute it to Biden. And all of a sudden, Biden's tax Americans and only the mega billion-dollar corporations idea will start to make him look more and more heinous over time, because the more and more you go after middle earning income Americans who are now struggling, the more you're going to seem more like a devil. And the problem that people are running into is that a lot of disabled people, I had one person on here said, he was like, oh, I'm so sick at how you send $100,000 is nothing. Let me reiterate, $100,000 that you earn in the scheme of things, of money and what it used to be able to buy, is nothing. You used to be able to buy a decent home for $100,000. That $100,000 home is now in the $400,000 arena. So the problem you run into is that these middle income people who are struggling are more fearful. And the one metric that's going to be the most telling out of all of them is that a lot of these middle income people that would have had another child or had children at all will start having fewer and fewer and fewer children. And the reason they're going to have fewer children is the same reason that animals, when they studied bunnies, hares, were having less and less, children, was because of this high level of anxiety. So they did a study to look at all these different animals, because, humans are essentially that. And it turns out that the mating process for bunnies reduced, the outcome was significantly fewer babies per litter that they would have. And it was due to basically an increase of fear and anxiety from having an uncertain situation. And that could be that there was more predators, that could be a lack of food, whatever. It was just an uncertain situation. The bunnies were fearful, so they had less kids. Now, they also did another study where there was basically a CEO with a corporation who paid every single employee at least $70,000 or more. Every single employee got at least a base of $70K or more. And what happened? The birth rate among humans skyrocketed. A lot of people that were getting into relationships, forming bonds, becoming very, let's just call it like it is, they were becoming units that were going forward as a whole. And they were doing great with work. The company was doing amazingly well. The workforce was very happy, and they started to all have kids. And that was the structure of it. So what's interesting is that basically America, if you look at why certain groups are having fewer and fewer kids, it's out of more and more fear. And, you always see the metrics. Everybody metrics where they look at, whites and Africans and Latinos and blah, blah, blah. And the reason why whites have significantly lower numbers, in my opinion, is because a lot of whites live in fear because they're not able to achieve at each generation going up the ladder and having more because they're making less at every generation. Now, there's a lot of arguments against that. Some arguments against that are basically that, people just aren't having kids because they don't want to have to deal with it. people aren't having kids because they, financially want to spend their money elsewhere and do something else with it. I get that. I totally get that. But my overall justification to my analysis is that if human beings truly felt more secure and human beings were truly in more relationships, and let's call it like it is, there's more relationship options than there's ever been. There's whites dating, blacks dating, Latinos dating, Asians dating, all different types of groups. And so there's more relationship options now. So the question then becomes, why is the amount of children being born less? Now, on the other side of that argument, you have farms, right? Back in the day, people were on farms. They had as many kids as they could. It was part of the Christian religion to have as many kids as you can. No condoms were used, etc. And that increased the boost. And that was your labor, where you had to basically make sure you had enough food to go ahead and feed them. But that was your free labor to push the farm forward. I get that. I totally get that. But at the same time, I agree. As people evolve forward, people will have children later and later in life. Like, that's one of the jokes that they would say at New York. Basically a woman is getting ready to have a child at 40 years old, and her best friend will look at her and say, whoa, 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 teen mom, what are you doing? That's where things evolve to. People have children less and less and less until you get to a later age, right? But the problem I have with this, Bruce Davis, thank you for the $1 donation. I really, really appreciate it. That's awesome. That's awesome, awesome. And guys, thank you all for those who donated. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the people who basically join the channel and just kind of hang out. The big thing that I guess what I would say with this is, at the end of the day, people should be having more kids, in the sense of how many people are on Earth and how many people feel secure. But I recently spoke with individuals who were much older than me. And I asked them, I was like, look, you lived through the Cuban crisis. You lived through these other wars, and I mean, we all, for some degree, lived through, the Afghan, Iraq, Iran kind of wars. We all lived through those. But, my thing was, the Vietnam War, all that stuff, even some of the World War II. My thing with this whole situation is, was it scarier back then, or is it scarier now? And I asked, I think it's about 7 people, might have been 8, but they all said it was scarier now. And to me, that was very telling. And I asked them, I was like, what's the deal? I mean, back then, the potential threat must have been greater, right? And what they all said was, they said, look, they can see a lot of the media. Wow, Euphoric Concepts, thank you for the $5 donation. I really, really appreciate it. That's amazing. That's really, really amazing. Thank you. So what was weird was that these older people were saying it was not as scary back in the day. And I was like, how could that be? That doesn't make sense, because they had nuclear threats. You were being taught how to get under your desk. You didn't know the technology. And the big thing that they would say, all of them, was that the news that they were receiving made them more afraid, and the new technology, the weapons of death, right? So that the weapons of death are far more evolved now than they were back in the day. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. If somebody wanted somebody, to pass away, to be terminated, they have little drones that can do that are the size of a fly now. So, they even have figured out the genetics and the function of it, where you can go ahead and leave a fingerprint somewhere. If that person comes within any amount of space of that fingerprint, that will mix with their genetics and they'll pass away. Even the most recent James Bond film was a reiteration of, getting injected with nanobots that make you unable to be around somebody else, because that other person would pass away as a result of you being near them. So the thing is, we live in a scary time because the governments have more control than they ever have, and we have less control over our own lives as a result. And that's due to taxation. That's due to basically more technologically advanced war weapons. That's due to there being so many people and everybody being disconnected from what they think they should be able to have from their government. That's also the problem with these politicians, is that we don't really have a leash on them. Like, how many of you guys feel like in your state that your governor knows who you are, that your governor knows what you want, that your governor is fighting for your needs. I don't think anybody on this channel would be able to say that. I don't think a single person would. Now let's make it smaller. The county commissioner. Do any of those county commissioners know who you are? Let's make it smaller. Right now we're at the mayor, right? Now we're at the local town level. Do any of the mayors know who you are? Let's go even smaller than that. The assistant of the mayor, right? Who's supposed to be taking calls, interacting with people, taking emails, all that stuff. Do any of them know who you are? So the ironic thing is when you apply that same logic pattern to the highest level, President of the United States, you have to think to what degree, essentially this person really gives a damn at all about humans at all in this country. And what I've noticed with presidents is that they have the best smiles. I mean, guys, when Obama would give a speech, it was like a drinking buddy that you would just hang out with was given that moment. They were giving you a moment where it was hard to say no. And, Bill Clinton, another great speech giver. Oh, amazing speeches. I mean, obviously now he's very old. He can't do it now, but back in the day, he would give amazing speeches. Donald Trump, not the best articulator, but a lot of passion to his speeches. So one of the big things that I just want to go ahead and promote to you guys is the identity of the following. If your politicians don't recognize you as a person because they don't know who you are, even at the smallest level, the town level, then they don't know what you need or want. They just go by these generalized, and you've seen it, like CNN, Fox News, they'll come out with some report and they'll be like, hey, it looks like from this, report that 70% of Americans are unhappy about this. And that's how the politicians know that they have to start to work on that thing. I don't think it should work that way. Or maybe if it does work that way, we need to be better at getting the statistics to show why we're so unhappy. And there's another problem too when it comes to the statistics, which is that no matter what you do, 20% of the population is going to say Biden's perfect. And no matter what you do, 20% of the population is going to say Trump is perfect. Neither of them are perfect. Both of them have done criminal acts that are horrific. Some of them reach to the level of felony adjudication. So my point to you is you can vote them out and vote new people in, but will those new people know anything about you or anything about what you want? I guess the biggest thing that I think, places like Reddit or YouTube or even TikTok is becoming that. I think one of the biggest things that we have to keep in mind is that the power of the human voice or the civilian voice in America used to be a lot stronger because politicians knew who you were. If you watch those old movies where the politicians would have a meeting and there'd be a big group of people, like you could tell what people wanted in the community. You could tell what they wanted because they were pissed off and they would tell you. But nowadays, if people are angry, and they go to like their school board, then they're on a list of, basically terrorist watch for people who are essentially upset about something that's happening related to their kid. And now they want to pass more red flag laws, which are going to essentially remove firearms from those that they feel are in a state showing any emotion where they're aggressive. And that includes somebody going to a town meeting and saying, I want this changed. And now you're in the potential for a red flag. So what I'm seeing is people keep losing more and more power. And this government exists not so much to create a clampdown on the earth when it comes to our strength and getting assets from these other countries. Because that's what it is. Our military, it fights some wars. It surely does. It fights some wars. And some of the biggest wars, well, the biggest war that we've had, the longest war that we've had was of recent. Obama is the longest war president that we've had ever. A lot of people don't realize that because he won the Nobel Prize for Peace, which is an ironic juxtaposition. But the thing with that is, and yeah, he inherited it and it kept going. And then it went through Trump. And then we go to Biden and then Biden stopped it. And, I get the whole thing on Biden stopping it. It was going to have to stop at some point. What we do with our military is not so much fight battles. It is create fear by other countries that we can sell to those countries that are always like the bunnies, like the parents that are in a state of anxiety. We sell to them our safety. And as a result of that, they let us go ahead and get their raw materials cheaper to bring back over to the US. Uh, Oil, textiles, food products, whatever. What our army really does, the reason why we spend so much money on all these massive ships and these massive, artillery weapons and fighter jets, etc., is that our military represents the big bad theory of negotiation. So, like, for example, if you're negotiating with two people, right? There's hard negotiation, soft negotiation. Hard negotiation is always going to beat soft negotiation. The I want this versus the hey man, this is always going to win in the end. And I learned that in mediation school and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, hard mediation, right? Hard negotiation always pushes this person farther this way so that the hard negotiation gets more in the deal. Now, with that said, what America does is it uses the most scary thing that countries face, which is being taken over by foreign nations. Now, America has bases all over the world. Why do we have bases all over the world? Because they invited us. Why did they invite us? Well, it's because we wanted something and they wanted something. It's just like any relationships, just like any deal. It's a barter, right? The kicker with all of that is that America is having a harder time controlling other nations because now America doesn't have all of the advanced technology when it comes to war. Other countries have it too. And that means not only the NATO side, but also the China/Russia side. China is expanding their weaponry capacity and space travel/space exploration at just astronomical speed. It's just incredible how much they've been able to accomplish in a short period of time. They're building secret bases, they're building secret particle colliders, they're doing all these just incredible things. And, we keep kicking them out of the scientific community. Russia is another one who keeps getting kicked out of the scientific community. But the baseline that's important to realize here is that America, when it comes to space exploration and those types of research advancements that only come from, particle colliders, studying space, etc., America's got a big problem because in order to remain being the big bad, America has to always be at least one generation ahead of all these other countries. And it's not. It's just not anymore. Sure, it's ahead of Russia, but China is there. It's there. It's got these amazing weapons. It doesn't have them en masse like we do. But the thing is, they're getting more and more money to go ahead and purchase into doing more and more of these advancements. There's another thing that China has, which is really scary. That's a major advantage over the United States when it comes to military activity. And that's that China has basically very different education platforms for their kids than we have in America. A lot of these Chinese kids basically learn multiple industries. A lot of these Chinese kids have this incredible education where they could go and get a job, in that industry or that industry, and they've got a solid math understanding, a solid this understanding, science, history, etc. With America, we have the opposite. We are struggling to find ways to get a lot of schools out of failed ratings. So the problem we're starting to see is that China is surpassing us not only with the future technology right now, but also they're starting to surpass us when it comes to future generations being incredibly well-trained and intelligent when doing analysis skills going into the future. Now, one thing America has always done well as a government is that it has been one of those places that finds talent and then brings them into the government. One of the main competitors to that was private industry. But if America continues to have massive taxes on private industry, then private industry is not going to be successful at offering as many benefits. So back in the day, people could make a lot of money in private industry and get package portfolios, right? That were really awesome. But now, as you guys have noticed, the pensions, the 401ks, all that stuff is disappearing. It's just not enough money. So the government is going to become, probably within the next 3 to 4 years, a preferred employer. And as a result of being a preferred employer, which it already is the largest employer in America, the problem that we face is that the government should never be the largest employer. There should always be other competitors, whether it's Walmart or Amazon, that basically are essentially larger employers. So the thing that we fear usually when looking at this scenario is that when one company becomes the largest employer, they dictate the culture as to what happens with employment. And you're already starting to see that. You're seeing, for example, Fauci go ahead and receive one of the best pension packages. That's even better than what the president gets, while leaving. You have to wonder how he's getting paid so much per year and why he's getting such amazing golden parachute outro package. And the problem with this is that the government has the potential of becoming a breeding ground for more and more bias and more fraudulent conduct. The scariest thing you can think of is there being bias or fraud when it comes to some group that controls a military far beyond the capacity of the people. When a lot of people talk about their safety, the big joke to me now is when they talk about, being able to own a firearm. A firearm is good against, other people that are at the same level of technology you are. But the government is very quickly moving away from just having, essentially a metal casing with some little pellets inside, tiny little pieces that create a little, a little fire, and that goes ahead and pushes, a bullet made of, whether it's, lead or copper or whatever mixture they create. That technology is so old. The future technology of weapons that have lasers is already here. The future technology of, having computer chips go ahead and read things and understand what's going on. The future technology of bullets now that can curve to hit targets when they move. They're being used with snipers, which are just incredible. I watched a video on it, and it's like, the snipers have a hard time missing using these bullets that can now change their trajectory based off of how the bullet moves its little fins and little techniques that it uses and the little camera and where it shows it going. It's just another level. So when people say to me like, yo, guns are, they're so dangerous, the ones we have access to aren't really that dangerous. They're not. Like if you go look at the military ones where they have exploding tips and all that stuff, I mean, that's amazingly dangerous stuff. But when you look at what we have, even if you take like, guns that were, basically quasi made illegal, you can only own the old ones, which are like machine guns. Even if you look at that, it's not that destructive compared to the new technology war machines that they're coming out with. All right, so for me, to summarize down all the security expert, for me, what this kind of comes down to is that at the end of the day, I think that people are going to go ahead shortly. I'm just letting them know real quick. I think people are going to feel very, very insecure. And I hate to put it like this, but the disabled, the retired, insecurity levels are particularly high for them financially. And the government is getting smarter about how they sell things. When it comes to essentially the greatest fear that people have, you look at women and fear of getting attacked, fear of not being loved, fear of a child passing away. You look at men, fear of not being able to repel an attacker, fear of not being tall enough, strong enough, not being, physically able to please a woman in the way that they would want to. These are fundamental things that lots of products have come out with to go ahead and supplement that fear, to make that person, a female or a male or any combination, feel stronger. The government's tapping into that now too, because it makes people feel afraid. It's easier to manipulate them. So that's something that is happening more and more every day. But let's call a security expert real quick, kind of get them on the phone real quick and talk about what's going on out there. I think that's really cool. We didn't have many people call in. I thought that was incredible because I got a little bit of a break. So thank you guys for that. I'm sure next week will be filled with callers. Let me see if I can get the security expert on the phone. We'll probably do like a shorter thing today. You know, and I realize the connection's not perfect because I am up on a mountain. Let me see if I can get through to him. Let me see. I'm hoping that's, I don't know which, that's probably the fifth or sixth ring.
Your call has been.
Oh no, we didn't get him. Hold on. Okay. Oh, it's okay. Okay, perfect. Let's see. All right, let me see if I can get through to him real quick. Let me try it again. Let me see. I just got a text message where he said, "Oh, perfect. Did we have you on the phone?"
Marguerite, last jump for com, 7 seconds, please. Oh, well, Bravo, start jump. Your mark, yeah. 3, 2, lock. Thank you. Excellent. Cheers. Cheers to your shop. Greetings, Walter.
Greetings, good sir. How you doing?
Good. Very good. Very good. Sorry we missed the connection last week. A little odd on our end. C.S. Lewis here, bringing you only the best and freshest knowledge, the greatest intelligence serving minds and people on the planet. Our group is truly compromised of the best, if you will, recognized as a preeminent organization internationally. Our group is known for concise and accurate reporting of observed, identified challenges, the actions that took place, or the opportunity to take place within the time frame, as well as the detailed validity of the complete results that may, can, or do impact our world. Very excited to be with you. Just decided to take things in a slight different direction of just how much is going on in each of the countries directly related to the conflict of Ukraine, Russia, and the impact in the United States of America and other countries. We took a look at the amount and volume of things that we're validating and how quickly our staff around the world is moving in software improvements that we have made, including, let's just say, enhanced software. That's just really starting to step up. One of the things that we found overnight that was a little original is Russia is starting to strip down jetliners for parts.
Oh, wow.
To keep their aircraft going. Very different. They're taking apart Superjet 100 and an Airbus 350 being dismantled for parts. Several airloft aircraft, including the Boeing 737s and the Airbuses that they've sanctioned and had parked on the runways for some time now, and they're starting to disassemble them for needed parts for their aircraft. It's just an odd piece, but as we move along, it kind of ties into the airstrike in Crimea that took place probably in the last 48 hours. Our satellite imaging is just super enhanced. This took place in Crimea on the western portion of the country on the Black Sea. And according to the original report from Russian Ministry of Defense, Lieutenant General Konashevkov, they indicated munitions were being detonated. Was trying to pass it off as something that they did commonly on the base. Preliminary information indicated just a few hours before by satellite, we could see 13 jets, a dozen all-weather attack aircraft, a handful of eight rotorcraft, 8 helicopters, as well as a large multi-purpose fixed-wing turbo airlift running down the runway as the bombings started kicking off on the ammunition fields. Subsequently, and moving right to the chase here, it looks like this could be the largest one-day loss of Russian military aircraft since World War II.
Oh, wow.
Very unique. Very unique. The strike on this air base could have been carried out by quote-unquote modified Ukrainian Neptune missiles. The Ukraine Air Force suggests the aircraft weapons depot and over a dozen aircraft were destroyed as a result of the explosions on the air base. Again, sitting on the western side of Crimea on the Black Sea, alongside of a tourist resort, and people standing on the beach watching this thing go up. Both the tourist resorts and the nearby residents ordered to evacuate causing a massive traffic jam on the limited roadway system. Ultimately, 9 folks have been reported as killed on the airbase with substantial injuries. We do have some wonderful words from the British Defense Minister, Ben Wallace. He considered Russians' explanations about the explosions are implausible. And his quote, which we pulled out, was, quote, obviously it didn't come from a tossed cigarette butt.
Yeah.
He said that ignited this. At the same time, Wallace noted that the airfield is a legitimate target of the Ukraine armed forces. His second really interesting comment that followed this earlier today was from once again from Ukraine. They're providing Ukraine with 3 more M270s. Those are those multi-launch rocket systems. They look like the HIMARS that we spoke about in the past. And that's in addition to the 3 already in Kyiv, as well as a significant number of missiles for them. And he said the UK was very pleased, quote unquote, very pleased with Ukraine's use of rocket launchers already provided by Western NATO allies and partners. Again, the high mobility artillery system can run some of the same munitions of the MLRS. The MLRS is the whole thing is to fire them and either through tracked or wheeled vehicles that they're mounted to, shoot and scoot, so they can't be fired upon. The rockets is if the inbound rocket is observed by a radar system that attempts to take it off path, the rockets have the capability to be rerouted in flight to attack the radar jamming station. So that should prove to be very interesting. So if they're looking for one of the, once again, rockets that was offensive or defensive, and anti-missile system was in place, it then reroutes itself to attack the radar jamming facility instead of the location it was originally headed to. Institute for the Study of War, one of our peers, they're a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy research organization. Been around since 2007. Very reliable. We trust their analytics and shared some conversation. We asked them for a position, and they indicated the Kremlin has little incentive to accuse Ukraine of conducting the strikes that caused that damage at the airfield. And that damage would be demonstrative in the ineffectiveness of Russian air defense systems. So they kind of validated where we were heading with it. They came out with a very interesting statistic that Russia's lost a little over 38,000 military personnel, 1,700 tanks, 3,900 armored combat vehicles, and over 703 drones in the course of its full-scale invasion. Posted that for us just about a week ago in a previous conversation, but thought we'd share that piece of equipment and personnel. Russia has created a new Army Corps for the war in Ukraine, but given very limited levels of popular enthusiasm, unlikely to be able to recruit the necessary people, just as people are starting to walk off the battlefield.
Oh, wow.
What we're finding is up to 40% of the Russian officers and generals in the war in Ukraine removed from their offices. Russia continues to crack down on senior officers due to their failed strategic plans. Said their the head of main operative directorate, the general staff, Zelensky, the Minister of Defense of the terrorist country, for the Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, and General Gerasimov, chief of the Russian General Staff. They retain their positions only because the Kremlin fears discrediting top leadership. So we move on to who else is involved, and I think we're up to a dozen countries just in the last 24 hours. Last evening, their time, Belarus journalist and press secretary, the opposition leader, Svetlana Vyakor, reported at least 8 explosions near the border with Ukraine, near the Zabarkov airfield, where Russian military aviation is often located. Russia continues attempts to redraw the border by forcing flagrant violation of international law. And they try getting the United Nations to partake and seriously undermine the rules based international system, according to the G7 foreign minister. So they're throwing stones, but they're not being really effective in their Russian media campaign. Mariupol Mayor Peter Andrussikov, explosions are heard at an oil facility in the Russian town of Yarsk near Mariupol. The military plan was to bring ammunition to the port through Yanks, which is an additional port. They're trying to use a cargo air terminal for getting some of their stuff into the country without it being seen. Just yesterday about this time, maybe a little bit earlier, Russian media tried to convince a whole bunch of folks that they had called to convene a meeting of the United Nations Security Council on the topic of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant shelling. The Kremlin believes it's the Ukraine that is shelling the nuclear power plant. Interestingly enough, the International Atomic Energy Agency stated that the shelling from 2 days ago, the power plant, did not result in an immediate threat to nuclear safety. Different story, because it's been shelled 4 times in the last 48 hours. Wow. And very, very recognizable words coming from the Director General from that IAEA, International Atomic Energy, announced he was briefing the United Nations Security Council today about the dangers at the power plant and his efforts to agree and lead the expert mission to the site as soon as possible. Separately today, he was informed of a restoration project for Ukraine from a nearby thermal power plant if needed. But again, this is they've got to get to this facility. They need to stop shelling it, and they've got to get the nuclear component back under control. They're very, very concerned about the inability of the current Russian occupation and the ability to keep a facility at the right temperature to avoid another episode in Ukraine, as we've talked about previously. The images that were put out with Russian media stating that they called for an organizational meeting were actually from the UN Security Council meeting that the Director General Grossi had indicated he had called, and we're able to verify this was not in Russia, but actually in New York at the UN Council Security meeting. He said the foreign ministers of the southern governments, they demanded Russia to immediately return control of the power plant to Ukraine, and the emphasis is that the Ukraine personnel on the plant has to be able to work without pressure and threats. We know what happens when nuclear power plants are, it's a global issue, but actually a global issue, as we all know. Major General of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Dmitry Marchenko, moving on, they're planning to deoccupy Kherson. That's just east of Odessa, west of Crimea, and complete the active phase of the war. And Major General indicates they'd like to do that by the end of the year. He also reported later in the day they shut down 2 Russian unmanned aerial vehicles, the operational tactical level, and the Luhansk and Kharkiv directions. They had more than 10 group airstrikes on manpower weapons and military equipment of the Russian occupied forces. They figured out how to start knocking the drones out of the sky from that are Russian sent, as well as adding another Su-25 attack aircraft that was heading inbound for the direction of the power plant. Armed forces of Ukraine took that out of the sky as well. Mariupol City, this is where the steel factory was, and we had the Azov troops with women and children in the subterranean tunnels for several months in the Donbass region. They published a video from the Philharmonic Hall that's currently occupied by Russian forces. And the Russians are building iron cages that were evident for us to verify and plan to hold a show trial of Ukraine prisoners there. Oh, wow. So we have a sharp eye on that. Mariupol was leveled so heavily that the citizens or people that have returned They won't have high-quality drinking water or a full power supply for quite some time. 90% of the infrastructure was destroyed, and the line, the queue for water, was city blocks long. Just trying to get basic needs. And I know you were talking previously about some of the items that people need to be aware of and their availability. Here we see a full-scale military attack they had set up and agreed to with Mr. Putin, safe corridors months ago to evacuate these people and basically use them as slaughter channels. And here they're trying to repopulate. The city's been absolutely leveled. Here's the stat. We talked about still staying with Mariupol, the Azov. There's still 131 women remaining in Russian captivity, according to the Deputy Prime Minister of Reintegration. Are women remaining in Russian captivity, according to the Deputy Prime Minister of Reintegration, Irina Verchuk. She said, among those who served, and this comes through our military channel and our shop here, who's dialed in with these folks, and others globally. Her comments to our folks here are, and it's a quote, among those are those who served in the Azov Battalion, with military medics, border guards, the 36th Separate Marine Brigade, the National Guard, the Armed Forces, and other formations. There are also 33 medics who are considered non-combatants, according to the Geneva Convention. That was her quote to us. According to her, what Russia did to Ukraine prisoners is an act of terrorism, and for which the world should list. They're trying to get Russia listed as a terrorist state, or at least one of those financing terrorism. Really, just heartbreaking to hear. We're going to get into the countries. Spanish railway system sent an railway warehouse to Ukraine to transport 600 tons of corn. And the idea was to bypass the Ukraine seaports that Russia has control of now. So they're using the rail system to experimentally see how that went. The first shipment of grain, as we realize, went public probably earlier this week or this past weekend, made it all the way to its port in Turkey, where it was refused for quality reasons.
Oh.
It was ultimately resold at a lesser value to an undisclosed buyer. So we have Spain involved here as a railway operator. Copenhagen, here we go, somebody new, hosted the Conference of North European Allies to support Ukraine at the level of the Ministers of Defense, and not as the premiers, the presidents, whoever it may be. More than 20 countries took part and accumulated a total of more than 1.5 billion in military aid. Estonia, another one we don't hear much from, closed its borders to Russian citizens that had visas. We're not a country. The European Union reported on providing Ukraine with a record 60,000 tons of vital aid. It included assistance from 180 ambulances, 125 fire engines, 300 generators, 35 heavy vehicles, and 4. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Massive. Germany last week handed over 4 more Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns to Ukraine in total. 12 have been transferred so far, and 18 more are expected. The Germans also handed over 13 armored vehicles to Kyiv, and 3 evacuation vehicles and 10 HIMARS. So really just awesome. Moving on to the next country we haven't heard from. Iran plans to launch satellite production jointly with the Russian Federation. For the people. The press conference was interesting. It was interesting. The translations. The day before they launched the satellite, manufactured by Russia on order from Iran, it was launched from the launch facility in Kazakhstan, launched into orbit by a Suez launch vehicle, Iran will create a joint production of the Russian Federation as they move through second, third, fourth generations. Interestingly, he claims that Iran claims, on behalf of the satellite group, he claims these satellites will be used exclusively for civilian purposes to monitor the environment. Yeah, we had about the same to say. At the same time, the United States and other allies have concerns Moscow will try to use the information about Ukraine military facilities, Tehran, and Israeli as well. We have Ukraine and the World Bank signing an agreement on providing a $4.5 billion grant. The funds were allocated by the United States. We have United States of America Defense Secretary of Defense Austin during a trip to Latvia last couple of days will provide Ukraine with military equipment for defense spending, quote, as much as necessary. On a different note, the United States said it'll provide $89 million to Ukraine for removing landmines put in place by Russian forces as they've left the area.
Oh, wow.
We may have talked about this in a couple of weeks, but what we're finding, those who went back to farming or had access to the farm couldn't run their farm equipment safely through the fields based on either mines or unexploded missiles.
Wow.
Laying in underneath the hay or in the weeds or wherever. Actually had to have bomb disposal people teams come out and walk in front of, a good distance in front of the equipment to avoid dealing with unexploded ordnances. So we have the State Department indicating Russians unlawful enough to vote for the invasion of Ukraine has lured massive swaths of the country with landmines, unexploded ordnance, we just said, and improvised explosive devices. The grotesque use of these devices is only previously seen, and especially with the Islamic State of Syria,
Wow.
which takes us back a while. How much is it? Well, there's these explosive hazard blocks. We talked about the land. They delay reconstruction. They can't clear the land. They can't return people to their land. They continue to kill and maim innocent Ukraine citizens. How much is there? Since late March, Kyiv has defused 160,000 mines. But there's still some 5 million Ukrainians still living in the area, threatened by bombs planted by the Russians. So here you think it's hard enough to lose your home, be evacuated to another country. You get back only to hear that your property, and you just can't make any effort. So they're putting teams together and going into train and search for them. Great enhanced video this last 48 hours of Lithuanian helicopters, another country we haven't heard much from, escorting Russian trains bound for the Kaliningrad region. This is done to ensure that the trains are not stopped and they're not being loaded or unloaded for their contents or for explosive devices. We have video training now of Russian soldiers being trained to fly Iranian drones. Sources on the ground indicate Russians have been training in Iran over the past few weeks, part of an agreement to transfer Shahed 191s and 129 unmanned aircraft vehicles from Iran to Russia. Very unusual. Here's another country we haven't heard much of anything from, Denmark. Denmark got involved in the last 24 hours. The Danish military of defense Ukraine needs support in fighting the Russian invasion. So Denmark is increasing military training assistance. Denmark would join the British-led training project, supplying 130 Danes while offering training to Ukraine soldiers in Denmark. They came back just a few hours later with they're going to increase the financial support for Ukraine by 110 million euros. Quote from the Danish Prime Minister that we were able to two quotes. One is, "This is a war against the values of which Europe and the free world are built." And the finishing statement is, "We reaffirm our commitment to support Ukraine," which we thought, and again, another country that has gone from on the map to front page, if you will. I don't know about front page in mass media, but for us, it's front page. So we have new folks. Swiss, we've always thought of the Swiss as being stable. Swiss declared its readiness to represent the interest of Ukraine and Russia.
Oh, wow.
Swiss Foreign Ministry spoke. Yeah. Swiss Foreign Ministry spokesman, Pierre-Alain Slager, said to us, Ukraine wants Switzerland to assume the mandate of a patron power in Russia. The relevant negotiations have been completed. Now the Russian side must agree to enter into the force of this mandate. And very quickly, the Russian Foreign Ministry came back and they said they refused to allow Switzerland to represent the interest of Kyiv. The reason for the refusal is the loss of neutral status by Switzerland after joining the sanctions against Russia. So here we just continue to roll on with just folks that we haven't heard anything from since the first of the year related to this conflict, this war. Last piece for countries we have listed is, according to the staff of Belarus, approximately 13,000 Belarusian servicemen have agreed to fight against Ukraine on the side of the Russian army. 6 battalions of the Belarusian armed forces are currently on duty along the Ukrainian border. This information has been, as the balance has been reported and verified. Interestingly, the release of this info through Russian media and Belarusian media is to assist in calming the fears of the large number of Russian soldiers that are refusing to fight against Ukraine. Literally just walking off the field. Walter, you had come and asked us very specifically about what's Mr. Putin want out of Russia. Yeah, what does he want?
Yeah.
We now have some good analysis done by our ROC. I shouldn't Margaret. Sorry, the geoscience group. I'm sorry, I'm getting dirty looks for calling them the rock hounds. Here's what they have. Russia seized $12.4 million worth of mineral resources so far since February. They occupy over 60% of the coal deposits, 20% of the natural gas deposits, and over 40% of the metal. We do recognize that some of the deposits were seized during the annexation of Crimea and the start of the war in Donbass. But Ukraine has one of the world's largest reserves of titanium, iron ore, lithium deposits, as well as coal deposits. They're worth tens of trillions of dollars.
Wow.
So despite them taking this entire thing down, what are they looking for? Sure. They're just trying to roll on, and if that's where they're at now, it's a little. We knew that the lithium. We knew that the microchip industry and neon gas, commercial grade neon gas, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we talked about. Lastly, for video that's as recent as maybe 12 hours ago, Russian attacked the city of Pisky, Pisky, with a heavy flamethrower system, a massive flamethrower system. This is a former wealthy suburb community in eastern Ukraine. The city's completely destroyed. Absolutely been leveled by this. Just very, very dramatic video of what I would indicate would remind most folks of napalm being dropped from aircraft in Vietnam, but maybe 4 times that. We talked about the movement of troops 2 weeks ago, about 25,000 troops moving towards Odessa, west of the Crimea Bridge and the Dnieper River. There's 2 crossings that were very vital. One was the bridge, the Anatolsky Bridge. That was taken out and damaged to a point, the last border before it gets to open water. That was destroyed, and only cars could cross it at one point, and then Ukraine needed to continue to destroy it further. They're trying to stop the supply chains from getting to the troops that are already across the river. So by limiting it to only cars, they thought they were doing a great thing. It didn't work out poorly, and they continued to destroy that bridge, the Anatoly Bridge over the Dnieper River. Just upstream from that, maybe 20 kilometers, is there's a hydroelectric plant, and that hydroelectric plant had both a dam and a rail line, and Russia was reallocating their resources to using that rail line and that bridge. And very recently, it is the last dam. They have disabled Ukraine troops. Special forces have destroyed that bridge and the rail, so nothing can make it across to supply those troops. So if you hear about troops being stranded, they're talking about Russian troops without a support system, without food, without weapons, and must they travel a tremendous distance, very, very long way home. Must they travel a tremendous distance, very, very long way home.
So I guess from my perspective, and you know, keep in mind, I look at this from a very broad brush as opposed to you, which you've got amazing intel and detail. When this whole thing started, you know, Russia moved in to what they claimed territory that was unclear as to who had complete ownership or proper ownership over it. And then we called this skirmish. And then the skirmish evolved into a battle. And then the battle took different geographic areas, and there were too many battles to count. So we finally gave in and called it a war. And it was between two nations, and now it's a multi-nation situation where NATO is mass funding Ukraine, Russia's getting help from its allies. I guess my question is twofold. When do we call this a world war? And when do we expect it to evolve into what is a traditional world war, where these other NATO countries, instead of just sending over $1 billion here, planes and artillery and anti-aircraft, when do we actually get to the point where there's an end to this war? Because until these other countries get involved, I don't see an end.
It's a very good point. I think what we have here is where does it end? It looks like that the commander of the Ukraine forces indicates that he believes it'll be done the end of this year.
Wow, that's ballsy. Okay, how?
So let me go back to my page one. Give me just a second here. Maybe I glossed over it. I could have. By the way, all this took place like in the last 24 to 36 hours, with one or two pieces from the day before that wasn't settled yet. So it's just been, when we talk about the volume of activity, just related to this, and here we have like 7 new countries coming on board, right?
Yeah.
So, where is he here? Yeah, so I think when we...
And I mean, look, let's say that Ukraine is saying within a year this will be done. And the only way Ukraine could make promises like that is if they, A, could negotiate an end, which they're not telling us about. B, they have some new super weapon that's going to end the war, and Russia will be too afraid to continue. Or C, it's just not going to be a Russia-Ukraine war at the end of the year. It'll be a World War III, in which case the Russia-Ukraine war evolved and the Russia-Ukraine war ended. So now we're on to World War III. Otherwise, I don't see, other than, of course, the more obvious answer, Ukraine issue here. You know, I mean, I don't know. To me, at the end of the day, what I see is Ukraine is not going to lose, because Ukraine's people have the fight in their hearts and, you know, NATO technology. And Russia is beating their troops against walls that move back and then forward again. So is Russia that financially unstable? And should that even be an issue? Should that even be an issue because they're backed by other governments that are massive? And at the end of the day, can we expect this to, de-escalate? Although I don't think it will. Or should we expect basically that this whole thing should basically erupt into what it already is, which is a world war? I mean, it is that. The only reason Russia hasn't touched another border is because of fear, but yet all these other countries are involved in funding, Ukraine. Everybody's made their stance. In the very beginning, Biden was afraid to say, we'll send aircraft. Now he's not afraid at all. They've tested the waters. They know Russia won't come back at us for it. So when do we call it a World War III, and when is it likely to end?
So when we take a look back, Walter, there was the Major General of Ukraine, Dmitry Marchenko, saying completing the active phase of the war by the end of the year. I think what we also have here is when we look at previous wars, we had a stake in the game if they were off continental United States borders for the president to declare war. We look at the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor as an example.
Right.
Actually came after the military vessels, and we all know that story. I think what we collectively believe is a lot is happening by proxy. But I think it's the outrage. I believe it's the humanistic outrage of the actions taken by the President Putin and some of the things that we didn't touch on as far as the graves and just outside of Kyiv, and some of the things that we're finding there, and basically they're war crimes, violations of the Geneva Convention, violations of human rights. We know that United Nations Human Rights Council has been involved. Here we have a nuclear power plant that is extremely unstable and requires significant and positive attention. And where does it become a global war? Now, one philosophy when we look at the unemployment in this country is I'm waiting for somebody from the current administration to say, look, we have all these military plants and they're working at a high rate and we're putting people back to work. And that's how we're going to knock down inflation.
I mean, that's sad, though. To me, for the president to rely on a war to fix, this economy is truly misguided, scenario where he's backing an agenda on something that we don't need. There's so many ways to fix the economy. He's just purposely not taking action fast enough to calculate what they were all calling that they hoped would happen, which is a soft landing. I mean, none of this is a soft landing. Was Ukraine and our interaction with it a soft landing? Maybe that had more soft touch to it, for sure. But I guess maybe something next week that we could check into would be essentially expectations for when the war is going to end, because Russia's never going to stop. And Russia is a massive war machine that can continue to pump out tanks and they can continue to find fuel. Ukraine is relying heavily on the support of NATO. We are the proxy setup along with all the other NATO groups. This war isn't going to end unless, basically there's a super weapon use that only one country has that everybody fears, stopping the capacity of nuclear bombs while at the same time wiping out something. Or, for example, it spreads and becomes a world war and we actually fight it out. And then what happens with nuclear bombs? Do they actually get used? Any one of these mega countries that begins to go under automatically releases nuclear arsenals, because what else do they have to lose? So what concerns me is that modern war doesn't work when nuclear bombs are shared by quite a few nations. And there's quite a few nations who stand to launch if things get really particularly bad for them, because then what do they have to lose? If they're facing total destruction, being taken over by another country, why not launch? So I guess my point to you is there a clean version where we get out of this war? Because this is not a cutesy thing where it's some island nation going at it with some South American country. To me, because one of the big bads is involved, which is Russia, I don't know or understand how to calculate how this war could end. And frankly, I don't think any of these, national leaders, heads of state, actually know how to do it. They're just funneling funds and gear and weaponry with the hopes that maybe Russia gets tired, but that's the Russians. Russians will keep pushing through the snow until they die, So yeah.
It's there was a briefing. There was a United States intelligence briefing regarding an update to a political group, and what they figured out is even though the bridges and they have these troops that are between Crimea and Odessa, and this was going to be the big push, and this was going to be the big plan. And ultimately, what they recognize is, despite that, the Anatolian Bridge being taken out, we tried to put a pontoon bridge in, and Ukraine's special forces went in and took that bridge out. We're getting accurate numbers, so it cuts them off, and they damaged 3 bridges out of the 6 over the river. But there's the number of 75,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded since the start of the war, and a pretty incredible number when you think about it. Just an incredible number. That could be 80%, 75 to 80% of their land forces. But again, like you said, they're still the Russian military. They sent 150,000, 190,000. Where does it end? An incursion into the United States, or taking out a cell of. No, they're not in Poland. They won't touch Romania because we're well seated there. The Black Sea, and but the SIMARs and the mobile launch systems that the Germans and some of the other countries are providing are game changers, absolute game changers, compared to where they started with urban and
And I propose this to you, beyond military might, because look, nothing beats hydrogen bombs launched, exploding all over the place. It's the end, that ends the blue ball. And I guess from my perspective, as a result of that, what are the examples of ways that this could end? Ukraine basically giving up. Well, Russia will just continue then, and they'll take more. So NATO won't allow that. And, it's one of these situations where China doesn't want us touching North Korea. China doesn't want us interacting with Taiwan. China is not even happy about us interacting with Australia. So I guess from my perspective, is there a way this war can end where everybody's happy? Or is it just slowly tiptoeing its way towards becoming that real world war? And essentially, at some point, let's call it like it is, we have an actual winning side, albeit there will be no real winning side. We will have a winning side. And what comes of it? I don't even think Russia knows. I mean, Russia started this with the hopes of taking this thing. It's the child reaching out its hand to grab the toy, and then basically the toy biting it, and I get that. But at the same time, America gets involved, and, Britain gets involved. All this money is spent, boosts the economy, right? Saves us from the IRS audits. But the point is, I don't understand from a practical application point, And I get that Russia's getting he's getting the oil and the coal and the diamonds and what he can pull from the ground. Apparently the wheat isn't very good, but hey, who cares? I get that. But at the end of the day, where does it go? Because, just getting more resources to pay for the war, well, maybe that's the bounty he needs, but he's never going to be able to validate all those deaths. He's never going to be able to beat the massive online machine of people learning more and more every day about the atrocities being committed and what's happening, etc. I mean, maybe they can hide it. Maybe they can hide it. Maybe they can't. But, at some point, when does Putin lose the power of Putin? Or when does the war explode into something much larger that I don't think anybody has figured out what would happen? Let's say China gets involved. Let's say Africa gets involved. Let's say Middle East gets involved. We go into a full-out war. Then what? Now we're fighting all these fronts, and we pump primary economy for a short period. And Ukraine continues its battle, but then what? Where do we end up at the end of it? We redraw lines. That's what always happens, and basically there's a loser. But we don't have a super weapon that they don't have this time. We had that last time. That ended the war. We don't. So to me, I guess my question to you guys is, what's there? We don't. So to me, I guess my question to you guys is, what's the new super weapon? Is it red mercury? Is it jamming launch sequence codes like a Dr. No James Bond affair where the nuclear bomb ends up in space? I don't know. That's something that I worry about, because I just, on a theoretical landscape, don't understand where the whole thing's going to go. And I think that's the big problem with the Earth as it spins. Everybody's too focused on what property lines they have. They're like shitty neighbors, Karens fighting with each other, as opposed to focusing on what's out there in space and what they can mine. And I think the future of all of this is that we've run out of frontiers, and we need to start taking the space frontier a lot more seriously. But we're just now getting the technology for it. But I don't know. What do you think?
And you bring up some interesting pieces that we didn't focus on. We thought we had enough countries involved. Let me just add this one piece. Somebody handed me a note and said we try and always, before we go to your softballs or discussion, I'll make sure we get this one piece in. Coca-Cola, the organization, will be rebuilding a destroyed kindergarten in the Kyiv region.
Oh, cool.
The company pledged to build a new kindergarten in the village in the Bavary district in place of the destroyed one. Based on hostilities, the new kindergarten will be designed for greater number of children and be equipped with a shelter. This is a village about 15 miles northeast of Kyiv, and its first attack back the first 10 days, like March 9th, right after this thing, this war kicked off. I think we're 160 some days in, but when we talk about organizations, we like to see where they're heading. 168 days we have from February 24th, but one of the things we haven't talked about again was the China-Taiwan problem, and then throwing rockets over Taiwan and hitting the safe waters of Japan. Now Japan's angry. We have Iran, Israel, and Turkey, and that whole showdown going back and forth, and the shelling there is starting to pick up. But what a lot of people forget about Ukraine, Russia, is since 2014 in the Luhansk Donetsk area, northeast of Mariupol, they've been fighting a battle there for like 8 years, 9 years, with like 14,000 deaths of people, the Russian separatists fighting the Ukrainians, and right in the streets. And it was like nobody's reporting about it. Nobody wanted to know that this was actually taking place. Where did for our families, our children, our culture, our society, and our race is humans, I would think that we would pray it ends quickly and peacefully. What is the end game for these characters that are making the decisions? You know, every time we get word that or increased validation that looks like it may be a coup or an unseating of the Russians, suddenly a whole bunch of military leaders disappear. They just disappear.
Yeah.
Or they get sent to the front lines with guns. They become war heroes. Every time that there's a valid concern, we don't like rumor very much at all here, but a valid concern that we investigate regarding that person's health, personal health, and abilities. We get sidetracked when we find out that the person that has been one of his most trusted people carrying the, we'll call it the nuclear football codes, if you will, seen in many photographs in many places, is found in a pool of blood in his apartment. You know, so does it take the unseating of number one, or Lukashenko, who runs Belarus, and some of the others, to decide who's going to take over? And what's the value? What is the value? When we talk about 75,000 people from one country that have died for the cause, you have to wonder how it affects of millions of people, but families, the ripple effect of children, ripple effect of the economy in the United States and Canada and North American countries. Are we counting on states and Canada and North American countries? Are we counting on that balance to keep the factories open and the materials being produced and the rocket dollars? So a couple of the shops were talking earlier in the week about the billions, and they used to get a little quirky when it was in the millions. When we start talking about billions, and then we think about the people in the countries that they live in, where some of the countries, take a look at Haiti right now, where under $5,000 or $10,000 a year is the income.
Yeah, I mean their GDP is small. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. If it's even forward moving.
Yeah.
Exports are down, imports are down. It's just really a kind of a alarming piece for a lot of folks. And think about the use of that money in a country, or regardless what country you come from, or you live in, or you're assigned to, or you work from. When you think about home, wherever it may be in the world, you think about billions with a B. It's a game changer, and we turn and think to ourselves, we just listed, 7 new countries that somebody said, hey, when did they get involved? One of the original members of NATO for 49, I think. I thought, okay, hey, they may not be known for a lot. Here we have Switzerland. Other than watches and great backpacks, one of the guys said to me, and great scenery in a movie, what do they really well in beautiful, scenery shots? What are they well known for? Here they're offering their skill set to create global resolve very, very quickly. No, I'm not interested. So one theories is it's a gross, we took a giant cross, as it was shown in one of our projections, and laid it on Ukraine and started splitting up the property. Poland, Belarus, and Russia, bringing Belarus back into the Russian fold. Seaports are gone, most of the airports are gone. Poland gets a little bit more, but nothing really for the value. And Russia just wants the land and the resources back. Crimea becomes not just an annexed piece, but it's back in the Russian fold, if you will. And when we start taking a look at this and the support, I wonder if, and I wonder this out loud, and we talked about it in another meeting we had, that if it wasn't so emotionally offensive, here you have a nation doing its own thing, and then the big bad brother country lies through its teeth and does what it does and breaks all the rules and brutalizes and rapes and kills and maims civilians. And then they bring in, we haven't talked about the Wagner Group in some time. They've retreated, reorganized, reformed, and they're out there, that private army of mercenaries that is just absolutely ruthless, with no controls. And when we think about people like that in the world, we wonder why people are outraged and how much will you spend to combat that? How much is the country willing to spend to combat that?
No, it's becoming massive war spending. I mean,
and where could have that used in each of the economies globally? And the military people from the United States just announced, like, Iowa National Guard is sending groups for training. Just randomly. Where did that come? Look, right now, the center part of the United States has been ravaged, starting with Kentucky, Illinois, and surrounding states just destroyed by the weather element. And they're sending troops over to support this into other countries. And it's not unusual. But when we hear about it, maybe we just didn't hear about it previously. At what length do we support democracy in the country, both financially and emotionally? And I think there's a large emotional component. Because I don't know too many folks even that work in the shops here or boots on the ground that we interact with that are either first generation of the next country, where the parents came from Poland, Russia, or Soviet bloc countries, if you will, that are cheering for this war on behalf of their country. And it's sobering, it really is, between the funding and the emotional sides, offering 110 million euro, a third of their military budget for the year.
Sure.
What is that? And that's beyond their NATO contribution. So when we start thinking about what will it take, I don't know what the value of identifying it as a world war brings to anybody. It doesn't unleash in many countries more weapons, more money. It's not like I almost spoke too soon and said it's not like we're coming off of a Great Depression. It's just the breaking news today of the potential cost of living. COLA for those that are on Social Security in any capacity was 9.6, 9.8 something percent, the largest since the 80s, according to the folks here. But the hard part is that really small.
Yeah.
As somebody pointed out, it's not like they're paying it forward. Folks who are struggling financially need that funding now. They need that assistance now. There's no mechanism that has ever been put in place that we could find in our research. And you would know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step into your arena, but we couldn't find a mechanism that, if it was such a great number, that there wasn't, I don't want to call it a stimulus check, it's probably the wrong word to use, but some sort of legitimate assistance.
No, and that's,
so folks can get
yeah.
to that point.
That's what I offered.
And
yeah.
make it,
Yeah. But
I'm sorry.
that's what I offered with the thing, saying we need a bill that basically gives people a stimulus check every time it goes above 5 points, 6 points, whatever. Because, at this point, the bottom line is, and even 9 something is low. It's realistically higher, and at the end of the day, people aren't going to get what they need. But it's just another deductible. It's a war is a deductible like that when you sit back and look at how countries handle it. But I tell you what, we're at 10:33 p.m. Closing thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Closing thoughts. We thank you for the opportunity collectively to share this info with you collectively. We can hope and offer. Depending on what we believe in, just a quiet moment to recognize those who serve to keep our country free, those who you may have contact with who have fought for the freedoms that Americans and others around the world enjoy today, regardless of your country of origin, that recognize what we have. Have a bit of vision to safeguard yourself. Have a vision to safeguard your family. One of the things that I did want to mention, I'm sorry, I do need to share one last piece. Mm-hmm. Kentucky, actually, for evacuation due to the flooding, had different shelters set up that took large and small dogs and other animals. Mm-hmm. So when we think about preparation for or self-preservation, please include your family pets if you can. I don't know. You'd be a farmer to talk about livestock. I don't know really how that goes. I don't think you're walking in with a herd of cattle. For pets, and some people have different animals for pets. But there was provisions. Again, get out ahead of it. And I saw one of your 5 things video. That was really well done. It doesn't take a lot. A little bit at a time, but get it together and keep it together. It's an important piece. We look forward to speaking with you next week. And again, that was just the last 30-some hours of what was going around in the world. So we thank you again for the time and for allowing us to share with you. And it's always on behalf of the shops here and the folks we have the opportunity to partner with. We really appreciate the time to share.
Perfect. Well, good, sir. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, sir. You will. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So that was excellent, guys. We got a strong update on what's going on around the world. And basically, the big function that I foresee is that we are kind of being closer and closer into almost a certainty for some sort of bigger war. That's what I see. Could not, etc. But Russia has the agenda of winning. Ukraine has the agenda of surviving, and both have massive funding behind them. So, that's an interesting thing. I would go ahead and recommend that you guys kind of check out basic things to purchase in case there's ever an issue. Think about your pets as well, as he stated. That was an excellent point. One thing I do want to point out is that you need to think of 2 spots. the spot where you're at right now and planning, and the spot where you're going to go in case there's something where you have to get out of that area. Most people in America do not think about war, or at least war when it comes to their geographic area. And one of the things that this modern war would bring to them is essentially destruction on the actual American motherland coast, which is, anything from Georgia to California, etc. So it's good to think of two places to potentially go. It's good to think of how you could get to them. And at the end of the day, guys, I will catch you a little bit later. We had a big show tonight. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. I'll catch you later. I'll catch you on Friday. Have fun, guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.